Hi there. Welcome to a channel called English for Emerson. On this channel we do a lot of things, and lately we've been doing social skills. Some lessons on basic social skills which are so essential to your quality of life. And it's something we just don't get a whole lot of instruction in, especially in school. Especially for boys. And that's the whole point of this channel, is primarily directed toward young men and boys about social skills. Listen, I tell you what, I had the worst nightmare last night. It was terrible. And it took me quite a while when I got up to snap out of it. You know, let's just say, well, let's call it a significant relationship I had, where this person would draw me into these conversations, starting with a lot of excessive details that were somewhat, you kind of get drawn in because you get some investment in the conversation by listening to all this detail. And you kind of get drawn into it like a spiral staircase that's going down and down and down and down. And the further you go down, the worse the conditions become. Anyway, this conversation and this dream started out with this person telling me that our relationship was made up of a bunch of images that were very, very detailed and dimensional and intricate, and each one of these images had faces and places that were very, very, had so much depth and were so interesting, were so intricate. And I'm looking at all these pictures that they're describing. It was almost like it opened up to me like a picture book. And so it's like, well, you get a little investment, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take another step down this spiral staircase. I don't know where it's going. And as we kept on going with, and she was using a lot of words, just on and on and on about how each one of these images from the past painted this picture of our relationship. And eventually, there was a picture that came up of us going out to lunch with somebody that she worked with. Now, this incident did not happen, but she said that this lunch that we had with a colleague of hers who turned out to be on heroin was upsetting to her because I had somehow exposed her to the world of drug addiction. Because we went out to lunch with one of her coworkers who happened to be on heroin, and I was there along. Somehow that was me dragging her in to the horrors of drug culture. And I pointed out, and it's my weakness, I'm always wanting to argue and justify, so it totally plays on my issues. I'm like, actually, that person was somebody that was your friend. I was just happened to be there. Well, I started to panic in this dream. The further I got down this staircase, it always was about how somehow my character was flawed. It would start off with all these words and descriptive language, and it was somehow interesting, and I'd start down this rabbit hole, and it was always the same. There was something deeply flawed about me, and if I actually followed that staircase down far enough, there was nothing there. It was just a black hole. But I was exhausted by the time I got to the bottom of it. And then I had to recover emotionally and energetically by climbing out of it, which might take me several days energetically to get that conversation out of my system. It was just exhausting and upsetting to have to defend my own character. And it went on. This happened over and over and over again until the bitter end. I tell you what, people are very interesting. 10% of people are going to cause you 90% of the problems in your life. 10% of the people that you interact with are going to cause you 90% of your problems. I don't know. That's just the way it is. There's people out there who are deeply hurt and disturbed who are going to bring you a lot of trouble. And their personalities, they are not going to change very much over the course of the relationship. That doesn't mean that people can't change. It just means they probably won't. Sometimes people make great changes in their life, and sometimes they're for the better and sometimes they're for the worse. But for the most part, you can't expect personalities to change. If you've got somebody in your life who's dragging you into these traps emotionally through some sort of a manipulation to make you feel bad about yourself or ashamed or guilty or confused or upset or drained, whatever, that's probably not going to change. It's probably not going to change. One of the most important social skills that you're going to have in your life is the ability to set boundaries and say no at times. And with this particular person, I got drug into so many of these black holes, these spiral staircases into hell that went to nowhere except upset and fatigue. I just, like in the dream, I started to take a few steps down that staircase and I realized what was happening. And I was panicked to try to get up those stairs back up to the top as quickly as I could and get the hell out of there. You've got to create boundaries with people. And even though it might be a small thing, you got to have the ability to say no. People are so manipulative and predictable in their habits in terms of their own way that they interact with others. And it can be very exhausting, draining, and debilitating. You got to set habits. You got to set boundaries with other people and with yourself. And it's something we all have to learn. And one of the most powerful lessons you can learn in life is saying no to people. And the sooner you learn it, the better.